You will hear a number of different recordings, and you will have to answer questions on what you hear. There will be time for you to read the instructions and questions before each section, and to check your answers afterwards. The test is divided into 4 parts, and you will hear each recording only once. Write your answers on the question paper as you listen. At the end of the test, you will have 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the answer sheet. Now, turn to Section 1. You will hear a conversation between a customer, Sarah, and a travel agency representative, Mark, discussing a holiday package to New Zealand. Before you listen, you have 20 seconds to read questions 1 to 10.
Good morning, Sarah. Thanks for coming into Horizon Travel today. I understand you're interested in planning a trip to New Zealand. Can you tell me a bit about what you're looking for? Are you thinking of a relaxing getaway, an adventure holiday, or perhaps a mix of both?
Hi, Mark. Thanks for seeing me. Well, I've always wanted to visit New Zealand because I've heard it's got stunning landscapes, and I'm really keen on outdoor activities. I'm thinking maybe a 2-week trip, something that includes hiking, maybe some water sports, and a bit of cultural exploration. Oh, and I'd love to keep it within a reasonable budget if possible.
That sounds like a fantastic plan. New Zealand's perfect for what you're describing. Let's start with the duration. 2 weeks is a great amount of time to explore both the North and South Islands. For outdoor activities, the South Island has some incredible hiking trails, like the Tongariro Alpine Crossing, which takes about 7 hours and offers breathtaking volcanic scenery. For water sports, you could consider kayaking in Abel Tasman National Park or even whitewater rafting in Queenstown. Does that sound like the kind of adventure you're after?
Oh, absolutely. The Tongariro Crossing sounds amazing. I've seen pictures of those emerald lakes. And kayaking sounds fun, though I've never tried whitewater rafting before. Is it safe for beginners? Also, I'd love to learn a bit about Maori culture. Are there any cultural tours or experiences you'd recommend?
Whitewater rafting in Queenstown is very beginner-friendly. They have experienced guides, and you'll get a full safety briefing beforehand. As for Maori culture, I'd highly recommend a visit to Rotorua. There's a cultural center called Te Puia where you can see traditional performances, learn about Maori history, and even try a hangi, which is a traditional meal cooked in an earth oven. It's a full-day experience, and it's very immersive. Would you like me to include that in the itinerary?
That sounds wonderful. Yes, please include the Rotorua cultural experience. I'm also wondering about accommodation. I don't need anything too fancy, maybe mid-range hotels or lodges. And how's the weather in New Zealand around March? That's when I'm thinking of going.
March is a great time to visit. It's late summer, so you'll get mild temperatures, usually between 15 and 25 degrees Celsius, though it can be cooler in the evenings, especially in the South Island. For accommodation, we can book you into comfortable 3-star hotels or eco-lodges, which are popular in New Zealand. They're clean, cozy, and often have great views. A typical package for 2 weeks, including flights from London, mid-range accommodation, the Tongariro hike, kayaking, the Rotorua cultural tour, and a few other guided activities would cost around $3,500 per person based on twin sharing. Does that fit your budget?
$3,500 is a bit higher than I was hoping. Is there a way to bring the cost down a bit? Maybe by staying in hostels or cutting out some activities?
Absolutely, we can customize it. If you're open to staying in well-rated hostels or budget guest houses, we could reduce the cost to about $2,800. You'd still get the main activities, but we could swap the guided kayaking for a self-guided walk in Abel Tasman, which is cheaper but still stunning. Also, if you're flexible with dates, flying midweek, like a Tuesday or Wednesday, can save you a couple of £100 on flights. What do you think?
That sounds much better. Let's go with the budget accommodation and the midweek flights. Can you also tell me about transport? Will I need to rent a car, or are there buses or trains?
New Zealand's public transport is decent, but for flexibility, I'd recommend renting a car, especially for the South Island, where some hiking trails are a bit remote. We can include a compact car rental for about $30 a day, which is quite reasonable. Alternatively, there are inner-city buses that connect major towns, and they're reliable, but they might limit your schedule. For example, the bus from Christchurch to Queenstown takes about 7 hours, but it's scenic. Would you prefer the car or the bus option?
I think I'd go with the car. It sounds more convenient. Okay, this is starting to come together. Can you send me a detailed itinerary with all these options and maybe include a breakdown of the costs?
Of course. I'll put together a full itinerary with budget accommodation, midweek flights, the car rental, and the activities we discussed. I'll email it to you by tomorrow afternoon. Is there anything else you'd like to add, like maybe a visit to a vineyard or a day trip to Milford Sound?
Milford Sound looks gorgeous from the photos I've seen. Let's add a day trip there if it fits the schedule. Thanks so much, Mark. This is getting me really excited.
That is the end of Section 1. You now have 30 seconds to check your answers. Now turn to Section 2. You will hear a tour guide giving information about a walking tour in the city of Edinburgh. Before you listen, you have 20 seconds to read questions 11 to 20.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Edinburgh City Highlights walking tour. I'm Fiona, your guide for today, and I'm thrilled to show you around this beautiful, historic city. Our tour will take about 2.5 hours and will cover roughly 3 kilometers, so please make sure you're wearing comfortable shoes. We'll be walking at a leisurely pace with plenty of stops for photos and questions, so don't worry if you're not a fast walker. We'll start right here at the Royal Mile, the heart of Edinburgh's Old Town. This street stretches from Edinburgh Castle at the top to the Palace of Holyrood House at the bottom. As we walk, I'll point out some key landmarks like St. Giles's Cathedral, which dates back to the 14th century and is known for its stunning stained glass windows. We'll also pass by the Mercat Cross, a historic monument where royal proclamations were traditionally announced. About halfway through the tour, we'll take a short detour to Greyfriars Bobby, the statue of a loyal Skye Terrier who guarded his owner's grave for 14 years. It's one of Edinburgh's most heartwarming stories, and the statue is a popular spot for photos. Please note that rubbing the statue's nose for luck is a tradition, but it's caused some wear, so we encourage you to take photos instead. After Greyfriars, we'll head up to Calton Hill, which offers panoramic views of the city. It's a bit of a climb, but it's worth it for the vistas. You'll see Arthur's Seat, the Firth of Forth, and even the distant hills of Fife on a clear day. We'll spend about 15 minutes there, so you can catch your breath and enjoy the scenery. A few practical details. If you need a restroom break, there are public facilities near St. Giles Cathedral and at the base of Calton Hill. We won't have a formal lunch break, but feel free to bring a small snack or a water bottle. If you'd like to purchase souvenirs, there are several shops along the Royal Mile, but we recommend waiting until the end of the tour so you don't have to carry anything heavy. Finally, a quick note about safety. Edinburgh is a very safe city, but please keep an eye on your belongings, especially in crowded areas like the Royal Mile. If you have any questions during the tour, just let me know. I'm happy to share more about Edinburgh's history, ghost stories, or even restaurant recommendations. Oh, and if you're interested in extending your visit, we offer a separate evening ghost tour that starts at 7 p.m. and covers some of the city's spookier tales. Right, let's get started. Follow me and we'll head toward the castle first.
That is the end of Section 2. You now have 30 seconds to check your answers. Now, turn to Section 3. You will hear a conversation between a university student, Emma, and her professor, Dr. Harris, discussing Emma's research project on urban sustainability. Before you listen, you have 20 seconds to read questions 21 to 30.
Good morning, Emma. Thanks for coming in to discuss your research project. I've had a chance to look at your proposal on urban sustainability, and it's a promising topic, but I think we need to refine your focus a bit. Can you start by summarizing your main research question?
Sure, Dr. Harris. Basically, I want to explore how urban green spaces like parks and community gardens can contribute to sustainable city planning. My main question is how these spaces can reduce environmental impacts, like air pollution or urban heat, while also improving residents' quality of life. I'm particularly interested in case studies from European cities, like Copenhagen or Amsterdam.
That's a good starting point, but it's quite broad. Urban sustainability is a huge field, and green spaces have multiple dimensions: ecological, social, even economic. Have you thought about narrowing it down to a specific aspect? For example, are you more interested in the ecological benefits, like carbon sequestration, or the social benefits, like community cohesion?
I hadn't thought about it that way. I suppose I'm most interested in the social benefits. How green spaces can make cities more livable, especially for lower income communities who might not have easy access to parks. But I also want to tie it to measurable environmental outcomes, like how trees and parks can reduce air pollution. Is that too ambitious?
It's ambitious, but not impossible, as long as you define your scope clearly. For example, you could focus on how green spaces in low-income neighborhoods improve mental health and reduce air pollution, using data from one or two cities. Copenhagen's a great choice because they've invested heavily in green infrastructure. You could look at their Superkillen Park, which was designed to promote social integration. Have you considered your methodology yet?
Not in detail, but I was thinking of doing a literature review to start, then maybe analyzing some secondary data, like air quality reports or public health surveys from the cities I choose. I'm not sure if I should include interviews with residents, though that might take too long.
A literature review and secondary data analysis are solid choices for an undergraduate project. Interviews could be valuable, but they're time-consuming and require ethical approval. If you want primary data, you could consider a small-scale survey instead, maybe an online questionnaire for residents about how they use local parks. That would be more manageable. What's your timeline for this project?
I'm hoping to finish the literature review by the end of next month, so I can start analyzing data in January. I'd like to have a draft ready by March, since the final submission is due in April. Does that sound realistic?
That's a reasonable timeline, but make sure you allocate enough time for writing and revisions. I'd suggest aiming for a first draft by early March, so you have a few weeks to polish it. Also, have you thought about sources for your data? For air quality, you could check the European Environment Agency's database. And for public health, there are studies from the World Health Organization that might be useful.
Oh, those sound like great resources, thanks. I'll look into them. One last thing. I'm worried my topic might still be too broad. Should I focus on just one city, or is comparing two cities okay?
Comparing two cities is fine, but it depends on how much data you can access. If you stick to Copenhagen and Amsterdam, make sure you're clear about what you're comparing, say, park accessibility or specific health outcomes. I'd recommend scheduling another meeting in a couple of weeks to review your progress. How about the 15th of December at 10 a.m.?
That works perfectly. Thanks so much, Dr. Harris. I feel a lot clearer about this now.
That is the end of Section 3. You now have 30 seconds to check your answers. Now turn to Section 4. Now Turn to Section 4. You will hear a lecture by Dr. Susan Carter, a marine biologist, on the impact of climate change on marine ecosystems. Before you listen, you have 20 seconds to read questions 31 to 40.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for attending tonight's lecture on the impact of climate change on marine ecosystems. I'm Dr. Susan Carter, and my research focuses on how oceanic changes affect biodiversity. Today, I'll discuss three key areas: ocean warming, acidification, and their combined effects on coral reefs and fish populations. Let's start with ocean warming. Over the past century, global sea surface temperatures have risen by approximately 4.7 degrees Celsius, largely due to greenhouse gas emissions. This may sound small, but it has profound effects. Warmer waters disrupt marine habitats, particularly for species like corals and shellfish that rely on stable temperatures. For example, coral bleaching occurs when water temperatures exceed a certain threshold, causing corals to expel the algae that provide them with energy. Since the 1980s, mass bleaching events have become more frequent, with devastating impacts on reefs like Australia's Great Barrier Reef, which has lost nearly 50% of its coral cover in the past 3 decades. Next, let's talk about ocean acidification. As the oceans absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, the water becomes more acidic, reducing the availability of carbonate ions needed for marine organisms to build shells and skeletons. This is particularly harmful to creatures like oysters, clams, and coral polyps. Studies estimate that ocean pH has dropped by 0.1 units since pre-industrial times, a 30% increase in acidity. By 2100, if emissions aren't curbed, we could see a further drop of 0.3 to 0.4 units, which would be catastrophic for shell-forming species. The combined effects of warming and acidification are even more alarming. For fish populations, warmer and more acidic waters can alter behavior and physiology. For instance, research on clownfish shows that acidification impairs their ability to detect predators, making them more vulnerable. Meanwhile, warming waters are shifting fish migration patterns, pushing species like mackerel and cod toward cooler, deeper waters. This disrupts fishing industries, particularly in regions like the North Atlantic, where communities depend on these species for their livelihoods. What can be done? Mitigation strategies like reducing carbon emissions are critical, but adaptation measures are also necessary. For example, marine protected areas can help preserve biodiversity by limiting human activities like overfishing. Restoration projects, such as coral gardening, where fragments of healthy coral are grown and replanted, show promise but are costly and small scale. Ultimately, addressing these challenges requires global cooperation and sustained effort. In conclusion, climate change poses a serious threat to marine ecosystems with cascading effects on biodiversity and human societies. My hope is that by understanding these impacts, we can work towards solutions that protect our oceans for future generations. Thank you, and I'll now take any questions.
That is the end of Section 4. You now have 30 seconds to check your answers. That is the end of the listening test. You now have 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the answer sheet.